Hello everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm back again with another weekly top 10 decks. I'm not sure if I'll keep doing this series, but I think I will. So far, a lot of you have expressed a lot of interest in it, so I'll be happy to do it. And obviously, it is subjective, and so it's not just me reporting on the meta. If I did that, one, the meta wouldn't really change, and two, that isn't I can't necessarily do that. I kind of can. I can just like look at Limitless or whatever. But I feel like it's more useful if I actually give my thoughts, because you can hear other people's thoughts elsewhere. But yeah, also if you want more of these, consider liking, subscribing, commenting down below as well. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts there as well, because I have some interesting takes this week about certain decks. Starting with number 10 here, which is Future Box slash Future Hands. The lists shown on the screen in this video are just like sample lists, so yeah. But so far, I was playing this deck, I was testing with it a bunch, and it didn't feel very good. Of course, this deck is it's like the new deck, right? And it's pretty good in the fact that like you really just take two prizes every single turn, except for a few scenarios. Notably, if your opponent doesn't, or I guess in two conditions, right? These both need to happen. One, you don't have boss, and two, your opponent has a really high HP Pokemon in the active, but you only have like I don't know. This list runs lower counts. I guess I'd say often you could see six, you could see three boss, two counter catchers, and prime catcher. But even with six, even with Iron Bundle, which I do think Iron Bundle is a nice addition to the list, um, but even with all those factors going together, I'm gonna struggle to always have boss because you don't really have much of a draw engine. You have Mew EX or Radiant Greninja, and so those will draw your cards. Also, I do think Radiant Greninja is a little underrated in the deck. Mew EX does have value in certain scenarios for its attack, but that's pretty rare, and it's not going to be drawing you as many cards as Radiant Greninja throughout the course of the game, and also it gives up more prizes. But anyways, the deck I think is really good because it can take two prizes all the time, though. It's very fast. If your opponent doesn't get off to a good start, you can often punish that. But also, you are very vulnerable to disruption and to like knocking out high HP Pokemon like Charizard EX, which is kind of good right now, and even any V stars or like Goldango you'll struggle against. You can one-shot Goldango, but it takes pretty much all of your resources. It takes an Iron Hands EX with the first attack, all four Iron Crown EXs, and a future booster energy capsule. Of course, you can go for a two-shot, but then you're not really going for the goal of the deck. I don't think it's a bad deck. I think it's a very straightforward deck, but in some sense that does punish it. And if you do try to get more techy, then you're also going to hurt your consistency. Or if you try to add more consistency, you'll hurt your like early game pressure and things like that. But yeah, I don't think it's a terrible deck, but I don't think it's as high as some other people do. I think it's good because it's easy, though. Next up, number 9, we got ourselves a Spratha Zadu. I have this deck moving up a little. I've been playing this deck a bunch. I actually stopped a little, but because I played it a lot, it feels pretty good. I think it feels pretty good against everything. It's again not an insane deck either. Notably, its damage output isn't super high against certain decks. It's pretty bad against Chien-Pao, so you do need to add specific text for Chien-Pao, and then those could cause other issues. You could do Bayonet, you could do Scissor as well. I do think Scissor is better than Bayonet, which Bayonet doesn't always work. But yeah, you can't always. You need a lot of Pokemon in play, and you don't necessarily have all that power that you need, especially if you don't get all the Pokemon. If you don't get multiple Zadus, which you won't do a lot of the time, especially early game, and then you're a Spathra EX, then you're not hitting that much. So if your opponent's just able to out damage you and actually attack, then that's an issue. But of course, you do have the ability on a Spathra, which increases your opponent's attack cost by 1, which is actually really disruptive to most decks. It's really good against Charizard as well, and Charizard's really popular. Like this deck kind of destroys it. I know some people don't think it's that good, and notably Radiant Charizard can be a bit of an issue. One, Scizor is nice for that, and two, you can deal with it with a Spathra. It depends on the scenario, but Radiant Charizard is struggling to attack a lot of the time as well because, well, it's a lot of energy, especially like in the even the mid game where it's gonna be it's still a lot, especially with Pokemon League HQ and or the Spathra EX, right? Still a really solid deck. I think it's underrated, but not super underrated. I think a lot of people know about this deck as well. Number 8 now, we got Lost Zone box, Lost Zone basic box is what I like to call this deck. And I don't know, I haven't played it too much. I've been playing it some, and I haven't seen it that much either. and it kind of has some of the same issues as the Future Box deck, vulnerable to disruption, kind of struggles to one-shot stuff. You can one-shot everything with Roaring Moon EX, but then you're down to 30 HP, and you're like actually down, as opposed to a regular Roaring Moon EX deck, which you're not. If you have the tool attached here, you don't have any of those tools, so you're definitely down to 30 HP. Your opponent can come in with like all sorts of things that just aren't very good. That like Curly, they can attack with Curly and knock you out, which just isn't good for you. Um, it's a Roaring Moon EX like fine for dealing with a target once, but you really don't want to be using it more than once because it's pretty awkward. And there are times when you will use it because you kind of have to, but it's kind of sketchy. Outside of that, of course, there's the consistency issues. You can always just like miss stuff, and your payoff is good, but it's not insane. And your reliance on Mirage Gate is kind of sketchy because you're going to run out of Mirage Gates or not hit your Mirage Gates. It's still certainly not a bad deck by any means. These top 10 are all good decks, but yeah, you also do kind of struggle against Charizard, which isn't good. Charizard is pretty good, and so you obviously do have options. You can target their bench, which can be difficult for them to deal with, but they'll probably be set up before you're set up, so that probably won't work. There are times when it will though, and it's really good. And then dealing with Charizard EX is hard, right? It's high HP, and it doesn't necessarily one-shot all your Pokemon in the early game, but as soon as you start doing anything, it's bad. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad deck by any means, but it could be, it could definitely be. I don't know. I think it has room for improvement. Honestly, I don't know how though. I think it's gotten to this point now, like a lot of people are playing it like this with the Roaring Moon. I don't know if everyone's playing Hoopa EX, but they are usually running Roaring Moon, Iron Hands, Radiant Greninja, and attacking with it, and Sableye, and I don't know if those are the four types it needs. I don't know if there's a Grass Pokemon either. There is no Tropius to one-shot them for only 2 energies, but that was awkward. I don't know. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down below on how to beat Charizard. You could run Teamed Evolution. I think that's an interesting play, but also it's a very risky play, and sometimes takes a bit of deck building to commitment in deck building. You need to dedicate a bunch of slots, which can be awkward. And yeah, I don't think it's a terrible deck, but I've definitely fallen out of favor with it a little bit. Next up, we got ourselves Arceus Giratina / Arceus Box. You could run Alolan Vulpix V-Star, Aerodactyl V-Star, other things. I don't really remember, but next pretty good. It once it sets up, it's kind of hard to stop, and it's just like a deck that kind of does its thing. It's very consistent and does rely on it does deal consistent disruption to you throughout the course of the game, which some decks can deal with and some decks can't. And yeah, it's pretty good. Maximum Belt's actually so good for the deck against certain matchups. I guess against Charizard, against a number of things. So it's really great against, or it's not really great, but it's pretty good against Charizard, which is really important in this meta because, oh, and when I say like Charizard's played a lot, it's played like in my. I've been recording a bunch of games that I think in next week's episode I'm gonna spend, or maybe not next week. I don't know. In a few weeks, I plan on starting to like edit my videos more, and I'm looking forward to that. So subscribe. Yeah, I've said that too much, but yes, I plan on doing that. And I was playing a lot of games, and most of them were against Charizard. Like when I say most, definitely over 50%, which is a lot, like an absurd amount. So yeah, Giratina V-Star is okay. Lost Impact can one shot with Maximum Belt, and then Iron Leaves EX can one shot. You can't really recover Iron Leaves, you can't recover Maximum Belt, and they could be prized or discarded or whatever. And so you got at most 2 times to one shot Charizard, and they're not always one shotting you back though, which is really important. So in the early game, we're kind of hitting each other pretty evenly. The decks actually play pretty similarly against each other. Um, I don't know if I'd say like in terms of damage, they're kind of similar, but because it's like damage scaling. Anyway, it's a decent deck, but then it also can just like it's not a very explosive deck. It kind of just does its thing. So if your opponent is able to like be more explosive and outspeed you, you won't win. So yeah, it does have some issues where if you're not taking like 2 prizes every turn, which you just won't be able to do sometimes, then if your opponent's able to do that, then you just lose. So yeah, I do think it's a deck though that's pretty solid, and you can add text. I do think Alolan Vulpix V-Star is also pretty nice, but yeah, still a pretty solid deck. Also not a deck I've been playing a lot, or I've seen some though. It's a moderately popular deck. Next up, we got ourselves Chimpao. And this deck is dropping down a bunch because its consistency isn't so good. And also, I don't know if I'd say it's directly worse than another deck here, but it kind of feels like it. Chimpao can one-shot everything, and that's really great, or pretty much everything. But it also does kind of struggle to when Vexcalibur dies, and it struggles when Beryl dies, and it struggles against item block, which isn't super common, but it is a thing, and ability blocking, and like ability walling, and there are a lot of things that can cause issues, and you're not a very adaptable deck. You could run Canceling Clone, which is sometimes played and can be useful, but for Radiant Greninja attacks, and you have Iron Hands EX to attack with, and so those give you a little bit of flexibility, but I don't know, most of you are just chimpowing, and then you're hoping you get lucky off of Pokestops, and the big issue is you can just kind of not get lucky. You can get very unlucky with the deck, and then that's not good. So it's a bit luck dependent. Again, Excalibur is obviously super crucial. You just kind of lose without it because you don't really have any other options. So that can be pretty awkward. And yeah, I mean, I just don't think it does have some adaptability, but people aren't playing it like that at all. I think I've criticized the deck before for running the same energy counts every single time. Although, is this a different water energy count? I don't know. I don't really play the deck that much because it's kind of inconsistent. Like you can winning and losing often feels out of your hands with the deck. It's either like, oh, I Pokestopped for something, or I Pokestopped all my Iridas away or something. So yeah, certainly not a bad deck though. It hits pretty consistent damage. It can beat everything pretty much, except against certain techs. But people don't usually play those techs that often. But if they are, then you will probably lose. But against certain techs, it's bad. But rare attacks, and then against everything else, it kind of can win every matchup. And on paper, if things are going your way, it does win every matchup. But of course, that doesn't always happen. So not it wins most matchups. Yeah, solid deck. Solid against Charizard. But again, Charizard's just gonna like boss Excalibur a bunch of times. So, you need to kind of be aware of that. But yeah, still a pretty good. It's also resilient to hand disruption. Not super resilient, but decently resilient. Because it's also simpler once you're kind of set up. So it's a good deck. Next up, we got ourselves this number 5. There we go. Oh yeah, this is control. It's chopped off at the bottom. How lovely. This is control box. So I don't. Yeah, I'll spoil this. I don't have Snorlax control like regular Snorlax control because I don't think it's that good. Um, it's dropped off a lot. People are tacky against it, which it just means it kind of loses. People know how to play against it, but this more complex control-based deck is really good. You could play this with Charizard DX. Arguably, that's like just Charizard, but yeah, it's pretty good. It can do a lot of different things. It's complicated to play, and yeah, but it's a very good deck. And it can beat most decks. It can beat Charizard. Sorry, my allergies are really bothering me. But yeah, I honestly don't play the deck too much, but I know that you can just go ahead and counter a lot of different things in a lot of different scenarios here. Opponent will honestly just not really know what you're doing. And so if you're looking for like a counter-based deck, well, Zadu is a counter-based deck, but if you're looking for a very complex counter-based deck, this is the deck for you, where you can just kind of deal with whatever your opponent throws your way, which is really nice. Hopefully, assuming it's not something super rogue. And then you have walling, you have a lot of wall stall based options with Wigglytuff, Mimikyu, and then Escape Penny Loops and things like that. And then you also have uh, like boss trapping and control options. You have Mawile, you have Snorlax, you have Airy, you have all those good things. And I think the big thing about this deck is people don't know how to play against it very well, which helps it a lot. But also, of course, there's an issue with the deck in that it doesn't always set up, right? So if you've ever played with control, you know that it's a very slow deck to start, and certain decks are just faster. Like every deck is just faster, and so it depends how slow exactly your start is. Also, Pidgeot, like that's very important, and you don't always get that as early as you'd like. Yeah, there are a lot of issues with control. There's a reason people aren't playing it as much outside of it being very complicated, and that's because it just doesn't work all the time. But it's still a very good deck and one that I do think is. I think it's good. And I think it's better than Snorlax because Snorlax is pretty easily techable against with Turbo Scenario and Yell's Cheer. Yes, there are counters to counters, but they're not great. I actually don't know if is there attack against Terror Scenario. I know there is coming in the next set, but I don't know if there is now. And there's a counter against Team Yelstrier. There's like a Sand Shrew. I think that's the right Pokemon, and that's it's okay, but it's not that good. And then yeah, I do think Airy is a little. I might make a whole video on Airy at some point. It's not super good in control, but um, it's not bad, but it's not great. And then yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to say about the deck. I've talked about it a lot in the past, so you can kind of hear my thoughts there. Um, but yeah, Radiant Charizard is also really nice, giving you the option to like knock something out, which is very important at certain scenarios. And yeah, you can disrupt your opponent. And a lot of decks are relatively linear outside of Charizard. So yeah, Charizard isn't super great for this deck, but it's also honestly Control and Charizard have kind of blended together a little, which is really weird, but really interesting. And then moving to the number 4 deck, that's right, we got Gardevoir. This deck, I don't know, I've been like so confused about this deck. I have no idea how good it is, to be honest. I played it, and sometimes it's like so when I don't like playing Gardevoir, a lot of you probably don't know this, but I'm not a massive fan of playing it. I don't know. It feels slow because it is slow, but this is single prizer or a series of single prizers that can one shot pretty much anything, which is obviously good. Of course, it's not always that because sometimes you luxurious cape it, so it's not a single prizer. And more importantly, your opponent can just lost vacuum you and you just die. So that's not good. But I don't see that happen very often. So yeah, you'd also Mimikyu, Fluttermane, which are really great options. Klefki is also good. I don't know. I'm not a massive fan of Klefki, but yeah. So pretty much you go ahead and you just knock everything out. It's really good. You're not that vulnerable to too many things. You got Curlier for drawing. You got Gardevoir for energy acceleration. And you obviously have your attackers, Drifloon, Screamtail as your main ones. You can attack with Gardevoir. Yes, you sometimes can play Gallade. You have the Fluttermane, Mimikyu, and Klefki, not really an attacker. And then, yeah, it's a very solid deck, though. Arventium Evolution is really great. Plus Buddy Buddy Poppin', that's just like so good in this deck. And yeah, I mean, it's a very solid deck. I think it's I don't know, it was underrated, and now people are like getting kind of hyped about it, and I'm kind of getting hyped about it, which is cool. But yeah, I think in a week or two we'll see exactly how good it is because it's a bit hard to say right now, but it is good. I think I was definitely underrating it before. It's a solid deck. Number 3 that we got Giratina Lost Zone. What do I say about this? Like I don't know. There's not too much to say. I talked about Giratina. I talked about Lost Zone. Kind of meets in the middle, but in a good way. Giratina V Star is really good, meaning that when your opponent like Ionos you down to like 2 or 3, um, you're not like you're not completely screwed as long as Giratina just doesn't die instantly, which it sometimes does. But you're more straightforward, so getting hand disrupted isn't as bad, and Giratina is much tankier, so that's really nice. And then you can beat Charizard. Yeah, you can beat Charizard with Iron Leaves, which is nice. And Giratina V-Star with your V-Star power, so that's nice. Does this mean you're good against Charizard? Not necessarily. You're kind of okay. But yeah, Charizard is a deck you need to be able to beat, right? So you can beat it with Giratina, Iron Leaves, and then you have Sableye, Radiant Greninja, which I mentioned with the Lost Zone like basic box. But now that you have options to deal with Charizard DX, better. Your opponent might not be prioritizing those mana fees, or might not like have set up the same level because you're actually a more like powerful deck. And yeah, this is just the best way to play Lost right now, I think. Um, there was Gudra. I know some people are talking about that, but that's not so good. But yeah, you go Giratina V-Star and just kind of hope you do have the ability to one-shot pretty much everything. I mean, literally everything with a V-Star power, and then the regular attack is really good. So I think it's Lost Zone. It's not too complicated, but it's not too simple either. It's kind of just where I like it. It's a very good deck and very powerful. Yeah, I mean, not too much to say about the deck though. It's pretty solid in place, and it's good. Next up, we got ourselves Lugia Archeops with Cinccino. I think this deck's really good when it sets up. When it sets up, it's the best deck in the game, kind of no question, because one, it beats control, which is really nice. It doesn't auto win against control, but it beats control. In most scenarios, you might need another stadium bump, but it's very good against control. And then outside of that, you can just go ahead and Chinchino, and Chinchino one-shots everything as a single parser, which is really good. I said that's my Gardevoir code, and it doesn't die to an item card, so that's good. Outside of that, it's very inconsistent. So yeah, this deck is just probably gonna fly around my tier list from week to week, jumping up and down, kind of like Shampoo. It's pretty inconsistent. It's not like awful. It's not like you never set up or anything like that. I mean, it's the number two deck. It's very good. This is definitely the deck I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down below the most because it's really interesting. But yeah, you just Chinchino, you Lugia V-Star, your Art Gaps into play, and then you Chinchino, and then you just knock everything out, and that's really good. It's pretty straightforward in terms of just, discard Art Gaps, but that can be awkward as well. You need to be able to do that. I do think there are a bunch of new ace specs as well coming soon, which are going to be better, presumably, than Master Ball for it. There's Legacy Energy, I think, and then there's also Secret Box. Secret Box is really good for this deck because it discards and it can search. It's not like insanely broken, but it's pretty decent. Um, it feels I think it's better than Master Ball. Master Ball isn't particularly amazing, and especially it doesn't discard. And then obviously the special energy, like there's a really broken special energy. So yeah. And then the number one deck is Charizard. There's not too much to say about this deck. Airy is pretty good here. Airy's good in a lot of decks actually, but not just control. And then yeah, I don't know. Like Charizard, it's really good. Kind of overplayed. I don't think it's like better than all the other decks in the meta combined, which is kind of how some people treat it, or how it much is getting played. It's not like that much better than all the other decks. I think it's like slightly, I think it's better than the other decks, but I don't think it's drastically. Um, and I wouldn't be like, if you don't have Charizard at the top of your top 10, I don't think that's like absurd. I don't know you'd put above it, but um, like I don't think you're like, it's like an absurd take. I don't think most people would agree with it, but I think it is like, I don't think it's drastically better than all the decks. Although I do think it is better than all the decks by a little bit, by a bit of a margin that is pretty visible as you can look at play rates and just play the game, and it is all over the place. But yeah, not too much to say about it. High HP, high damage, not insane damage, but very good damage and versatility. And yeah, it's really good. But anyways, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all the good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.